Hey, hey, VA fam. Welcome to Brown Ambition. I have a very special guest today, and I just want to dive right into this conversation. Let me first do a proper introduction for today's guest. Her name is Amina AlTai. She's an executive coach and a now best-selling and celebrated author. Amina has coached Olympians, Fortune 100 leaders, and founders, and shows us in this book, her new book, The Ambition Trap, how to reconnect with ambition that's rooted in purpose instead of exhaustion. In her book, again, The Ambition Trap. If you haven't gotten your copy, I don't know what you're waiting for. It has the most gorgeous, beautiful, what are we calling this? Like kind of a sunset tie-dye moment kind of cover.
Yes.
I love the art. I love I love the colors. In this book, which I'm going to go ahead and say it's like the anti-hustle guide for anyone who's sick of chasing success and in the process as a byproduct of that success chasing has to mean we end up burnt out, feeling unfulfilled, chasing our own tail, which I can relate to so deeply. And I'm so honored to have Amina here today. She's going to share how her own journey from burnout to breakthrough created this guide and how she's come up with practical tools for making ambition a source of joy, not stress. Welcome to Brown Ambition, Amina. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I had my fangirl moment before we hit record. I have been a longtime listener of the show. Love your work. So happy to be here.
So, talk to me about the title. When did you have the title for the book? Was that the title from the beginning?
That was the title from the beginning, and I don't mean to be annoying, but it dropped in on my meditation cushion. Now, the subtitle was another story. We probably had like 50 versions of the subtitle. I know. I know.
I'm on about 50. I think I probably brainstormed about 50 subtitles. I
Wow.
didn't even give yours any. We need to shine on the subtitle. The Ambition Trap: How to Stop Chasing and Start Living. That came to you on the meditation pillow?
The ambition trap did. How to stop chasing and start living was a little bit of a different process.
Okay. And at the time, was that something that you had experienced or were as a coach yourself and coaching leaders, was it just something that you were confronted with time and time again, helping people work through their own version of the ambition trap?
Yes. I actually feel like my whole life was a bit of a walking ambition trap. So, I am the child of immigrants, and I was told to just put your head down, work really hard. And I took a lot of cues from my dad. My dad is a brown man named Muhammad and was trying to find his place in the world of work. I just noticed him struggling so much, and I just picked up a lot of cues from him, and I carried a lot of that programming into the workplace. It served me until it didn't serve me. I had this like nice on paper life, and 6 years into my marketing career, I burned out and developed two autoimmune diseases. But it happened in this really dramatic fashion where I'd started to feel really sick, and I'd been to 7 different doctors because if you're a person of color, medical gaslighting is super real. And it was the seventh doctor who called me on a Friday while I'm going to work, and she says, Amina, if you don't go to the hospital today, instead of going to work, you will be days away from multiple organ failure. So I had gotten so sick. My relationship to success and ambition was so dysfunctional that it was almost taking me out for good. And so that was the beginning of it. That was the beginning of me realizing that I needed to renegotiate, reevaluate my relationship to success and ambition. And then as I became a coach, I just had a front row seat to all of these people that were highly ambitious, but navigating very similar traps to me. And then it was really interesting. It all kind of came to this boiling point in 2020. At the height of the social justice uprisings, I was collaborating with this organization called Inspired Justice, where I was doing social impact empowerment coaching. But what I was noticing was these patterns alive in these folks that had also been alive in my life and had been alive in my other clients' lives. And I'd seen in my dad. And I was like, okay, this is a conversation that I really need to dig deeper into. And that's where the ambition framework came from.
I hear what you're saying about watching your dad. In my career, I'm starting to realize how much of an influence my own dad had on my relationship to ambition. He's very much black man, grew up in the deep south, and I have a lot of complex feelings about him and his career because I do feel like in a lot of ways he underrealized or wasn't able to like realize his own ambitions for himself. And so when I approached my career, I sort of looked at it like I'm going to do all the things I say I'm going to do, and I'm going to fulfill those ambitions and goals for myself. I've been 5 years into entrepreneurship kind of full time. And sometimes I'm finding this fear that I'm going to end up like that as well. Like I won't get there. Do you talk about that in the book? I know it's about like the trap, but is that one of the traps? This feeling of like we're on this path, and all of a sudden there's this fear that what if this doesn't work out?
This is so real, right? But I think failure is part of the process. Obviously, as people of color, as a Black woman, you're held to completely different standards. And so we also have to be really conscious of the, like, telling us to fail fast and often, I think can be problematic sometimes. But I think that this idea of, like, my biggest fear in life is my unrealized potential, right? But I think that when we live from that place, I think it's a bit of a fight or flight thought. Well, it is for me anyway, right? And so, but it does elucidate the trap because, so many of us are told to take up space and to speak truth to power. And when we do, we're told that our stories aren't real, or we're told to throw our hats in the ring, and we're told we're both like too much and not enough at the very same time. And this is the trap, right? That like we could somehow be both too much and not enough. And then we try to outwork a broken system. And so the ambition trap and overcoming the ambition trap is about living into purposeful ambition versus painful ambition. Painful ambition is driven by the core wounds, and it has a couple of signatures. So there are 5 core wounds. They are rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. And as a result of each of the wounds, we wear a corresponding mask. So if we have a betrayal wound, the mask we wear is control. If we have an injustice wound, the mask we wear is rigidity or perfection. And then you can imagine that if we build our ambitions upon that, it can be a bit of a house of cards. And that's what I did, right? That's kind of like how my life came tumbling down. And I think that's true for a lot of the people that I've coached as well. And so painful ambition, the signatures are moving at unsustainable urgency, black and white either or thinking, hyper focused on individualism versus collaboration, instrumentalizing our minds and bodies to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of ourselves. And so the invitation really is to look at the wounds that are driving our relationship to ambition and that painful ambition, and see if we can do some work on them and pivot into that more purposeful relationship with ambition, the more why-driven ambition.
And was all this knowledge that you have now, understanding the wounds that the ambition's coming from, did you have that prior to this health scare? Did this work start for you after you had that health scare and moving forward from there?
Oh, I was 100% a mess when I had the health scare. And I think it's like life looked great. Like I looked like I had it together, right? When I use the word mess, people are kind of like, is that the right word? But it was so messy in my head because I had all of these ideas about what success looked like, how I needed to show up. And I was absolutely coming from a place of pain. So I have a betrayal wound, which is when we feel like our caregivers don't live up to expectations. So we try to control everything. I have a rejection wound because I grew up a brown kid in a larger body and was just like ruthlessly bullied growing up. And so I was like, okay, I'll avoid. If I don't throw my hat in the ring for things, I never have to be hurt again. And those patterns were playing out so big in my work life, especially the control one. And I think that's the one that was making me the sickest because I was trying to dot every I, cross every T, control everything to feel safe. And you just can't. And so after my health scare, I went on what I call my Eat, Pray, Love year. And I was still working, but I basically went to study nutrition. I went to study mindfulness, somatics, all these things just to kind of feel better for myself. And when I did, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I don't have to suffer through work. I need to teach this. So it was a couple of years after that I put together my curriculum and started coaching.
So you're working, and when we talk about your corporate career, you said 6 years in, you're kind of having this health scare. But I'm curious, was some of that driven from the career path that you chose? You're in New York City, you're in marketing. What was your day to day like?
So I had started my career in marketing and I initially worked on the brand side. So I worked at Cartier. That was my first job. And then while I was at Cartier, I got this really cool opportunity to work on their Women's Initiative Awards, which is this contest, and they work with female entrepreneurs. And they give funding and mentorship to these female entrepreneurs. And nobody was doing anything like that at the time. I was like, this is so cool. I want to figure out a way to do this full time. So I wrote a business plan and I pitched it to someone that I'd gone to school with. And I was like, let's start this agency where we work with emerging female entrepreneurs. And one side can be traditional agency, so we can pay the bills. The other side can be, we'll take sweat equity in these companies to help build them. And I had no boundaries and I was deeply codependent. And so imagine starting a business with some of those traits. And so I would put my clients before myself. I would put my employees before myself. And I just didn't know how to take care of myself and grow a business at the same time. I'm an elder millennial, and I feel like that's such a millennial thing to
Me
do.
too. Wait, what's a millennial thing to do?
Well, just that I like look back often and I was like, wow, the hubris of being like, I'm 26, I'm going to start a company.
See, I'm an elder millennial too. One of my ambition traps now is starting to feel like, wait, should I have done things differently 10 years ago? Should I have done this more early in my career, that more. It's such a useless train of thought. It's like that, the mind part of the mental part of it, like these little side quests that your brain tries to take you on is one of the like the biggest challenges I found being at this stage. You're definitely not in the beginning of your career. You're not a brand new bright-eyed bushy-tail entrepreneur anymore, but you're like not where you want to be yet. I don't know what this messy middle is,
Yeah.
but it is some bullshit. It is hard.
It is
These
hard.
doubts.
Yeah. It is hard. I find myself even thinking about like the fourth quarter of my career too, because I do feel ageism is so real. And so I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself to knock it out of the park in my 40s because I just feel ageism is the realist. And
Mm.
that's not a helpful thought for me either. And so I do think the mindset work is such a big part of it. The mindset work, the nervous system work, because they go hand in hand.
Ooh, the ageism. Yeah. I think that you you don't really feel it until you think you start to get in your 40s. I'm not quite there yet, but I will be. And for me, I just think about the studies I used to cover as a journalist that were like women reach their peak earning years at like 44 or 43, whatever it is. I forget what it is now. What I have found that helps is I will try to listen to as many women over 50 as possible. So I will like actively go and search. I'm like, where are they talking about? Like, where are they at? And where can I listen to them? And then I find my sources of inspiration, especially ones who didn't hit it big until like their 40s and 50s. That helps a lot. It's that opposite action side of things. So, and this is happening in tandem with the pandemic, or is this like before the
No, no,
pandemic?
this is pre-Pandy, a long time before the
Yeah.
pandemic. This
Okay,
is
so you're in your 20, you're girl bossing yourself and you have and then you're struggling. You said you have like boundary issues and you're putting everyone before yourself. Then it starts to manifest as you're stopping feeling well. And then you have this health scare. Do you just leave the business? What do you end up doing with the business?
over the course of a year, I figured how to transition out. So it was the first time I'd gone to life coaching as well. So I remember like coming home and getting this diagnosis and talking to my roommate at the time. And very serendipitously, she was like, "Oh, this woman that I work with just started this life coaching program." And I was like, I need it. I don't want to know anything about it. I'm going. Like, where's the sign up sheet?" Literally, I didn't do any research. I just signed up, and I think it was one of those it was such an important moment. I'm so glad that I said yes. They really helped me transition out of the business. At first, they were like, "Are you sure? Like, let's not jump from the frying pan into the fire." But I just had this deep knowing that that wasn't the place that I could thrive, that I just made such a mess of things that I needed a do over. And I had made choices from a not aligned space. I'd made choices from like what I thought my life should look like and what I thought would be shiny and wonderful and what I thought would get me celebrated and all the things, right? Really from my wounds. And so over the course of a year, I wrote my transition plan, I hired a replacement for myself, and then there was a couple of months where I was job hunting and had nothing lined up, and it was just my job to find a job and just keep working on my own mindset and well-being. I ended up taking 2 roles consecutively as head of marketing for different wellness companies. And it was because the wellness space had kind of brought me back to life in lots of ways. And I was like, oh, okay, like maybe this is where I want to be spending my heartbeats. But it was kind of me dragging my feet. I wasn't quite ready yet to jump into coaching. And so I needed these 2 experiences before I was ready. But then the last corporate America experience I had was so hellacious, and I won't name names, but I think sometimes things need to be really terrible so that you will jump off the cliff. And I just felt like it is now or never. I feel like I don't have a choice. I can't stay here every day pulling on my life-size callus to get through the day. I think it's time to do my own thing. And so I did. I jumped off the cliff. And then that year was a year of transition. And I was doing some marketing consulting because I knew that's what I could pay the bills with. And then I was building my coaching practice at the same time. And over the course of a year, I was able to let go of those marketing clients and step fully into coaching.
Our journeys are very similar. Sometimes I'm like, a lot of the stories of women who launch their own businesses big, they start with some sort of corporate experience that's so toxic, or they get laid off, or they get fired, or it's just so toxic they have to leave, or there's some kind of big, dramatic, traumatic event that starts that. Does that mean that I started my business from a space of a wound that I need to unpack? Like, it felt very natural to start the business the way that I did, but in a way, and I used to say, well, I'm so grateful that that didn't work out because I had told myself I needed the validation of that brand, that business to prepare me to do the thing. And almost like you just said a second ago, you need those 2 jobs before you were ready to coach. I wonder now because it's 5 years back and I'm looking and I don't know if things would be different had I not had that forced start, that come to Jesus moment where I had an opportunity to make a choice. Am I going to go choose another corporate path, or am I going to take a chance on myself? And a lot of the women that I work with are also coming from that space as well. I don't want to do this anymore. So is the option doing my own thing, or should I try and take a bet on another corporate role? Even though I chose my own thing, I find it hard to give a clear, direct answer to that because there's pros and cons to either side. And I don't want to guide anyone into a path of entrepreneurship because it's so hard and it's so stressful, when maybe sometimes the comfort, or at least the quote unquote security of corporate, might be, fine for
Yeah,
them right now.
it makes complete sense. And I think each of our risk profiles are different depending on our lived experience and our financial status, right? Each of our risk profiles are different. And I think each of our skill sets are different too. So bumping those two things up against each other, for somebody, it might make sense to actually take the next corporate role, but in a place that's more aligned with their values. But for somebody else that really needs freedom and that's a top ranking value for them, maybe it is entrepreneurship and they're willing to meet the toughness of it because the other side of it gives them everything that they want. I think it's really different for each of us. And just going back to your question about the pain piece, I don't think that there is one universal right answer, but for most of the people that I coach, they do have to have these moments of deep pain because the pain has to be big enough that then we're willing to navigate the fear, right? It has to be so uncomfortable that we're willing to cross the chasm to the other side. I've met some people, and I think that they're rare, that they're like, I didn't need the deep pain. And I'm like, blessings to you. Write a book, teach us how. But most of the people that I know need to experience extreme discomfort so they can choose another way.
Yeah, you just think about like tech bros that I would encounter early in my career. I came up in like business, finance, journalism, and working at Business Insider, and I'm unpacking all that in the book now that I'm working on. And that culture, they didn't have some deep trauma. They just were like, I want to start a business. Everyone, I'm just gonna like get a bunch of dudes together. We're gonna start this. We're gonna get funding, and it's just like fine. And then like women of color that I work with, there is that deep pain and trauma. Maybe I understand it's racism and sexism. It's just like the cards that were dealt. But part of me is like, dang, can't it just be like, we just had a lot to offer? But then is that like even possible? We usually have so much on our shoulders. The stakes are so high. Like you said, we have to have something that drives us past that fear because we have so much to lose.
Yeah, I feel like that's the thesis, right? It's like the tech bros, and I talk a little bit about them in my book too, right? They have a tremendous amount of privilege, right? They're getting the venture funding. We're getting our tiny slice of the 2.7%, right? And so the ways are going to part for them in a way that they won't part for us. And because we meet so much resistance, we need fuel and fire for the resistance. And sometimes that is the pain, right? To get us over the threshold. I wish it were different. I remain hopeful. I remain hopeful that it can be different and that the next generation will get to stand on our shoulders and that it can be different. But we meet our shadows in entrepreneurship more so than anywhere else. We meet such headwinds in the workplace that I think we have to use that to fuel us forward.
Now we're talking about, like you said, that big shift and that passion, but you also talk about in the book how that's not always enough. And I would agree. I think that if it's whatever that wound is and you're fighting against it, like that sense of betrayal, well, I'll get back or I'll control everything, that can't last forever. What's your advice to people who are feeling that lack of drive? Whatever was fueling me has run out now. How do I keep going?
That's when I think that we really need to look at the bigger purpose question, the bigger why, right? So many people talk about passion, and listen, passion's great. We need it, but passion is fickle. It is meant to shift for every stage of our life, right? When I was going through my Eat, Pray, Love year, I was like really passionate about nutrition. I actually went to nutrition school for a stint, right? I didn't become a nutritionist, right? Didn't anchor my life in it. And so it's important to make space for passion, but not to anchor everything to it because it is by nature transient. It's supposed to change over time, which is why I think purpose is more important. So that deeper why. And in the book, I have this 5-part framework for building purposeful work. And I think that it needs to leverage our zone of genius. It needs to be aligned with our values. It needs to be connected with the impact that we want to have, whether that is with our family, community, or the greater good. It needs to be contentment based, and it needs to meet our needs. And when we are cultivating work that touches on all 5 of those areas, that gives us fuel and fire to keep going, right? The impact piece, I think about this so much with your work, with my work, right? We came here to help a very specific population. And that's the thing that gets me out of bed every single day, right? It's like, I cannot let these people down. Also, when we're showing up in our zones of genius, that is innate for us. So we don't actually have to use the same push and effort that we do if we're showing up in our zone of excellence. It just flows a little bit easier. So these are things that we can tap into that allow us to kind of be carried with the waves and the current versus fighting that uphill battle.
Well, can we talk about the not sexy side of being in business or even in leadership? I wanted to get more clarity on the kind of clients that you're working with. Are they entrepreneurs? Are they, leaders and executives in a corporate world? Or are they a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. It's actually a 50-50 split. 96% of my practice identify as women, 70% are women of color, and then they're split across entrepreneurship and what I call intrapreneurship. And so the ones that are inside of corporate, they're the first, the few, the only, right? So they might be the first CEO of their venture fund. They might be the first one in the C-suite at their Fortune 500 company. And then for the entrepreneurs, they are usually VC backed, sometimes service based, and they are solving a very specific problem, usually based on their lived experience.
Okay. When it comes to the leaders who are in corporate, the first, the fews, the onlys, what are the challenges that they're coming to you to help them get over?
I feel like every season's a little bit different, and I feel like my clients kind of mirror back things that I'm navigating. One thing that a lot of them are navigating in this particular season seems to be authenticity. How can I not code switch? How can I show up in my highest and fullest and cultivate internal stability so it feels safe to do that? That's something that quite a few of my clients are navigating in this moment. Themes definitely come up in different seasons.
Are they trying to figure out how much of their thoughts on politics and policy to be authentic? What is it that they're wanting to be authentic about but not sure?
So I have one client that is transitioning, but they are in the Midwest. They're in sort of the belly of the beast of capitalism. And they're like, how do I show up every day in my values and true to myself and say a thing where it doesn't feel safe to say a thing, where I could lose my income if I say a thing? They're also a person of color. So there's just so much complexity to that, and there's no right answer to that. And it's sort of supporting them through finding their own way in it, but it's really complex. I also have another client, woman of color in banking, again, sort of like in the belly of beasts of capitalism, wanting to support queer folks and people of color and just being able to bring cishet white folks on the journey and help them understand how the experiences are different and cultivate more spaces where people can have community spaces and practice being more in their authenticity. Yeah, I think it's a wild time for all of my clients because a lot of them want to say the thing and they don't feel safe to say the thing, and they have families that they have to feed, and so they're navigating that space. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer because I think sometimes it just is not safe. And each of them are navigating that in different ways.
It's so freaking hard. Maybe in 2020, 2021, there was a sense of the corporations were, at least that they weren't completely sincere. We know that now, but there was a little bit more tolerance for the kinds of conversations. But today, everything feels like everyone's on tenterhooks, and I don't even know what advice I would have for someone in that situation. Honestly, I might be like, talk to your therapist, talk to your community, and don't bring that shit to work right now. It's like nothing is so safe. I'm glad that it's you and not me being asked those questions. But what have you found yourself saying in some of that? If you can share a little bit of some of the advice you've given them.
I do this thing with my clients where they have unlimited voice messaging support with me because there are so few spaces where you have somebody that links arms with you and is willing to partner with you, because it's so lonely in those spaces. It's so lonely at the top. So we'll be voice noting about a lot of these challenges. There's no right or wrong answer. You have to cultivate internal stability. You have to support your nervous system to feel as safe as you can in a room, but we don't know what we're going to encounter in that room. All we want to, what we can do is support our nervous system so that it can act appropriately, right? And appropriate might be like a fight or flight response because that space is not safe, right? So I'm trying to support them to find that internal stability and find the most resonant action in that space without putting their lives on the line, right? And a lot of the times, my invitation for them is cultivating community and finding their allies and advocates, because there's safety in numbers. That's kind of the best thing that we can do. Who are those people that if you're going to say something in a room, they're going to have your back, or they're going to have your back afterwards, or they're going to second whatever you're saying, and really seeing if you can find those pockets of community to create the external stability to mirror the internal stability that you're creating for yourself. My book came out in May. And I started to think about my marketing plan last November. And I kind of got on the court with a lot of my asks in early 2025. As soon as I started planting seeds, I'm a executive coach, leadership coach. I do a lot of work with ERGs, specifically for women's groups, for people of color. And so when I was talking to these ERGs was right around the time of the executive orders and dismantling all of the ERGs, literally happening at exactly the same time. There was a moment where I felt personally victimized by this in the way that so many people do. If I stay in victim mode, this work doesn't get into the hands of the people that need it and they win. I have to find the different ways to get this work into people's hands. Because I had organizations that I had spoken to at the end of 2024 and they're like, okay, we'll buy 200 books for this conference, we'll buy 500 books for this talk. And then literally in February, I had them calling me being like, we can't take your books. Find some other place to donate them. We can't have your books in our four walls. So then I had to get really agile about other pockets and spaces that I can find to get this work out. And that's my invitation for my clients too. If we can't do it in the four walls, what are the other ways and what are the other spaces and places we can get this work out? Because the work doesn't stop being necessary.
I'm really sorry that that happened. So how did you pivot, or did you pivot in your strategy? Because I know for a lot of authors, getting those speaking opportunities and getting corporations to make these big orders is a key part of success.
So then I looked for community groups. I looked for the women's groups. I did a talk for the Arab American Association of Bankers, right? I looked for all of the spaces and the pockets of where my people were. And sometimes there were 12 people in a room versus 200 people in a room. And it required more energy and effort from me. But I also think I probably got more nourishment back being in those rooms than I ever would have gotten in the 500-person room. There definitely was a rub in the beginning. And I think that it all works out the way that it's supposed to. And I'm a chronic illness girly. So I was worried, am I going to be able to lift this? This is asking more of me. But I ended up getting so much more back being in those rooms that I think it worked out.
And I mean, damn, your book it doesn't have any of the trigger words that I feel like it would get deleted by the government these days. But you got to open the book and read the words to get to that good stuff. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of people in power are like opening books and looking at the words, you know? Like I can't imagine it being on a banned book list because it's so look, it's cute, it's pink, it's sunset, it's ambition trap.
She's cute, let her in.
No, but I mean, obviously, I mean, since then it's become a bestseller, right? You made the USA Today bestsellers list.
I
Congratulations
did.
to that. I know that doesn't matter, but it matters.
Well, the whole reason I thought was like it'll move my flywheel. So like, I was working really hard not to come from a core wound with this book, right? So I was like, rejection wound, right? I was working really hard not to come from that place. So my thought process with the bestseller list was like, if I hit the bestseller list, more people will see it, more people see it, more people will buy it, more people will recommend it, more people will buy it, and round and round and round will go. I'm glad that I was able to shift my come from and not come from a place of pain.
Yeah. Girl, the things I've heard about how to think about the lists and these rewards or these like trappings of success and list shit. I mean, I signed with a big podcast network in March, and even then I know just because you get the thing that looks like success, it doesn't always end up being the thing. And I'm like, dang, I would like to learn a different lesson. I've had enough of those. The trapping of success does not always lead to the big breakthrough moment that you're expecting. I would like one of those. I think I've had enough disappointments like by now. You know what I mean? Like, can we get some like wins that actually are like a win? Like
Yes.
game changers?
I
Ah,
want that for you. That's my intention for you, that you get some game-changing wins.
yeah, it's just, I think it goes back to being an entrepreneur as a woman and a woman of color. In the book that I'm working on, there's this relationship with like data and statistics and the reality check that you want people to like be grounded in realistic expectation, but at the same time, the expectations for us are usually on the lower side, and my mission is always to like find the optimism and find the but what if there's an exception, and like what if you are the exception, defy that expectation. There's no way I can continue that without that community around me echoing it in times when I start to doubt myself. And with that, I want to talk to you about your community and how have you gone about building a support system for yourself to carry yourself through this, and how important has that been for you?
Yes. When I was writing the book, what I learned is that less than 3% of books sell more than 1,000 copies. And then I was looking at book sales for my particular identity and just published authors that are Arab. It's less than 1% of published authors in the US are Middle Eastern. And I was like, It is my mission to beat the odds. This is unjust. We need to take up space. I think it's really important that we find our ways to really shift the numbers and the data. Community has supported me so big. When I had my book launch party and I took the stage and I was telling people none of this is possible without community. We are made of the people in the rooms. We are made of the people that will have us on the podcast. We are made of the editors that say yes to us, and none of this is possible alone. And I think it's so important to remind ourselves of that. The toxic individualism is part of painful ambition, that we have to do it all ourselves and nobody's helping us and that we're self-made. Nobody is self-made. We are made of people in these rooms. It's so important that we remember that we give gratitude for that we pour into those people in the same way that they're pouring into us. I had all different kinds of community supporting me throughout the 3-year journey, from my best friend, who literally was such an important emotional support, to my amazing editor and my amazing agent and my family, my sisters.
Where do you fall in the birth order?
2 of 5.
Oh, number 2. Okay, so you're older, but not the oldest. Do you feel like your dynamic and your siblings, is that part of the drive that gives you that sense of I'm going to be a boss?
It's interesting. Mixed, and I think being mixed is a very particular lived experience. So having these 5 other humans that are navigating something similar, I think is so important. Just like even now I'm noticing hormonal shifts in my life, but I can't always go to my mom because we're not exactly the same. So having sisters who have a similar lived experience to me, I feel is really helpful. I talk about this in the introduction of my book. Growing up, my older sister was really sick with type 1 diabetes. So I kind of assumed the older sister role. Though I'm number 2, I really feel older sister vibes, but then also sometimes feel like the middle child. And so we have a separate middle sister group chat. Sorry, older and youngest sister.
You get the best of both worlds. What kinds of career paths have your siblings taken? Do they come to you for advice, or is it like, oh, that's Amina, I'm not gonna, I was there when she was into Backstreet Boys or whatever it was.
My older sister is a lawyer. I think she's had like a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. And so there's definitely been seasons where she's like, I want to be a stylist. What would that look like? I'm like, let's talk about it.
Oh, okay.
And then my sister number 4 is a social worker and therapist. And when she was navigating that change, was exploring what it could look like to set up her own business. And they've seen me in all seasons of my life. So whether they take me, quote unquote, as seriously as my clients take me, I think is a different story. But I think that they know they have a resource here if they need one.
Oh, good big sis. Good big sis. How do you define the idea of scarcity in a career path, and how does that play into the idea of an ambition trap? Is that part of it?
It is. Scarcity is a big part of it. I think scarcity is manufactured by the dominant in-group to maintain their power. And then it causes fighting in the in-group because we feel like there's only space for one woman of color, one person with a disability, one queer person. I think actually scarcity is a tool of the oppressor.
How do you get over that sense of there's only so much, and if they're not getting it, then I can't either, or if I get it, then that's all there is? Like, how do you get over that?
Because I think that's zero-sum thinking, right? If I get it, then there's none left for anybody else. Like if I get a book deal, another woman of color can't get a book deal. No. When I was actually negotiating my book deal, it was really important that I negotiated because I was like, the advances we get tend to be lower than white women. So we need to expand the bands for anybody that identifies similarly to us. I think that me taking up space makes space for other people. We're actually just carving out a path. I think that's one of the most important mindset shifts that we can make, but we can internalize. Scarcity is perpetuated by the dominant in-group, but we can internalize that and weaponize it against ourselves and tell ourselves, well, there is only space for this one person, and so I'm not going to get it, or I have to fight this person out, right? But I actually think collaboration can be even more helpful and even more supportive so we can make more space. So like if you and I negotiate together, then I think that we can both win together. Rusha Katulshian, shout out to her book Uncompete, which is all about that. And I think it's such an important and necessary work. And interestingly, so we've created a little group with her, me, and 4 other authors, mostly women of color, to talk about, well, what are the learnings that we've all had and how can we support each other so everybody can have a win? Like just because you're at that conference doesn't mean I can't be at the conference the next year.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I was going to ask about, I think that it's hard to sometimes articulate how you build friendships and communities. It's one of the reasons why I created the Mandi Moneymakers, because when I was doing those free coaching sessions, the theme that came up is isolation and feeling alone. And I just wanted to at least create a space where I could help counteract that in some way, shape, or form. It's not you don't have to join a professional community like that, but just meeting one person at an event or online and asking the question, like my 5 year old, I'm like, ask if they want to play. It's okay. But as an adult, it's more intimidating. But I have found like 9 times out of 10, they just love that you asked. And the answer is usually, oh my God, yes, please, I need a friend.
Yes.
How's that been for you? Similar?
Very similar, right? I think it definitely feels awkward. It's not as natural as it was on the playground, but I
Mm.
don't mind being, I've like come to embrace my awkward. And so I'll just be like, I feel like we should be friends. Like, can we hang out? And one of my dear friends actually initiated this for me, like sort of invited me into that because a couple of years ago, she asked me on a friend date. She was like, we've seen each other in these rooms. We kind of move in the same circles. Can we just have a friend date? And then it was so funny because we had this friend date and it actually felt like a first date where I was like, do you want to sit on the inside? Should I sit on the inside? I love your dress. Can we share fries? Like, it
I
was
so get that.
so,
Yeah.
it was precious. But I think like make the awkward ask because 9 times out of 10, as you said, it works out beautifully. And then you have this amazing friend that you wouldn't have had.
You both like, I go home and I'll like text them. This was so great. Thank you so much. Let's do it again soon. Or like, should I wait till the next day? Should I text now? Is that too thirsty? Yeah, I
You
think
just leave it the thirst.
you just gotta be cringe. Like, stop being afraid of being cringe and just be
Exactly.
cringe. All right. So obviously everyone listening, BA fam, we need to go get the ambition trap. I wanted to ask just to like wrap up the conversation. What's the key takeaway from the book that you hope that anyone who's reading it kind of closes the book and they move forward with this feeling inside or this idea?
So essentially, what I'm saying in the book is that ambition is neutral and natural. It's for everybody. At its core, I define it as a desire for more life. So that can't be right for some people and wrong for others. But we need to really shift the cultural narrative around ambition, which is that the framework on the pivot from painful to purposeful ambition. And so, my invitation for people is to find their right relationship with ambition, not that instrumentalizing, hustle, painful, scarcity driven version, but that generative, why connected, purposeful ambition. And it's going to look different than what we've seen in the world because what we've seen around ambition has been largely dysfunctional and doesn't support people with non dominant identities, but it needs to look different. And so, my invitation is that you show up in your big ambitions, that you take care of yourself, because the only trap is believing that our dreams aren't possible. And I refuse to let any of us fall into that.
Thank you, Amina AlTai, for joining me on Brown Ambition. Thanks for the pre-show chat. I needed that. And Brown Ambition listeners, BA fam, please go pick up her book. Amina, where can they find you online? How can we support you? You're on IG, I know that.
Thank you so much. You can find me on Instagram at Amina AlTai, my website, aminaaltai.com, and you can get the book everywhere you buy books. If they don't have it in your local bookstore, you can just ask that they order it.
And are you taking new clients? Should we open that up for BA fam?
Yes, I would love that. I always have space on my roster for amazing humans. So if you feel called, please connect. Please
All
reach
right,
out.
so I'm sure we'll link to your website so people can go find you if they want to coach. But first and foremost, get the book. It'll be a great entry point. Maybe get the book and then, that'll make you even better client for Amina. All right, thank you so much for taking the time, BA fam. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.